How do you really know if someone loves you? I mean, truly, without hesitation or reservation, loves you. Here's the story of how I found out. I met him at a bar. Sounds a little cheesy, doesn't it? But he wasn't there looking for adventure or a one-night stand. He was in a local country band with serious rock overtones. The band had a fairly large audience, and the place was packed that Thursday night. My friends literally dragged me there, and my mother almost threw me out the door. Go have fun. You used to love to dance, so dance. Let yourself go and just move to the beat of the music. You don't even need a partner, and the girls promised to look out for you. It's time, honey, time to go back to the woman you were. I refused to wear a dress, but my pride made me wear really tight jeans and a red silk blouse that showed a little cleavage. Looking around, I decided that I just needed a hint of makeup, a light lip gloss, and lifted my hair a little, finishing the outfit with my red cowboy boots. The girls looked at me and smiled. Melody stated in a singer's tone, "She's back." They all hugged me before putting me in Autumn's monster SUV. 6 women, and we were still comfortable. We were heading to a new place, Silver Spurs, and the reviews I had read were favorable. When we got to the parking lot, I was frozen in place, and it took them 10 minutes to get me out of the car. Autumn, the oldest of our group at 39, put her arm around my shoulders. "We're here with you, dear. Your sneaky ex will still be out for about 6 months to a year, and if any of his ne'er-do-well friends are around, we'll let the owner know. That should scare them off." Gradually, I began to relax. At first, I danced in a group with girls, but by the second set, I was already dancing with 2 men, guys I knew from school. One hugged me and I froze, then relaxed. He was my friend and was genuinely happy to see me. I never did a single slow dance. Line dancing had almost gone out of fashion, but the band played a couple of numbers for the old-timers, and I remembered the steps, so I swirled and twirled on the dance floor. When it was over, I was red and happy and dying of thirst, so I returned to the table and downed my ginger ale before asking the waitress for a glass of ice water. I was relaxing when the band, still in country rhythms, performed the modern Western swing song Tennessee Moonlight by Freddie Johnson. I had the album, and I was surprised at how well they did it. The main vocalist did not sing, passing the microphone to another member of the group, and his high tenor did an excellent job. He played a small guitar on a stand using a steel slide, and the sounds he made were amazing. Later I found out that this is called lap steel. An older couple danced past us, cheek to cheek, and it made me sad, wondering if I would ever find love like this. The band took a break, and when they returned they announced it was their last set and asked if there were any requests. Half the bar screamed the name of a song I'd never heard, "Green Grass and High Waves." The group smiled and said they would save it for last. There were several other songs, and they performed as many as they could before the last one. They had 2 great guitarists, and the bass player treated his instrument like a lead guitar. When the steel guitar was added to the mix, it created a pretty impressive wall of sound. The song started off slow, with lots of guitar licks in the intro. Then the steel guitarist joined in, creating a beautiful counterpoint accompaniment, after which another guitarist led the way again. Soon the song was being played at a breakneck pace, supported by the drummer and bassist, and I was mesmerized as I watched the steel guitarist's fast finger movements. There were tight 2-part harmonies in a couple of places, and by the end of the song people were standing applause while the band bowed, sweating. When the lights were turned on, the applause had not yet died down. I got a good look at the band when the lights came on, thinking they must be 3D printing guys like this in Nashville. All have medium-length hair and full beards or goats, wearing some version of cowboy hats. Only the steel guitarist and drummer were shaved, and the steel guitarist had tousled but short sandy hair. They walked past us, and the drummer stopped. "Hi, Katie. Did you enjoy the show?" Our friend Katie hugged him, laughing. "You guys were on point today. This new guy really sets off your sound. Where did you get that from?" His smile grew wider. At church, my mom made me go to an Easter service, and he was there, and I found out that he sometimes plays with the church musicians. When he told me what he played, I begged him to play with us. It took 2 months to persuade him to play in public. Oh, here he is. By then, Kyle had approached him and Billy introduced him to everyone. Usually I didn't say much, but this time I praised his skill. What made you choose this instrument? I thought he wouldn't answer. I had an accident a few years ago and it damaged my left hand. I can still play the guitar, but my fingers get tired after about 30 minutes. This way I can still play and I really enjoy it. Well, you're playing really well. I'm glad you were able to overcome your difficulties. Thanks. You know the old saying, when the door closes, jump out the window or something. It was nice meeting you all. Kyle is cute. I looked at Katie as she smiled. We drove home, tired but happy. He'll do it. Wait, he has those killer brown eyes and hair that just begs to be run through a woman's fingers. So why don't you do it? She raised her ring finger. I already have my man, so I'm set for life. I would sleep with him. We both looked at Nanette as she grinned. And then you'd sleep with someone else the next weekend, Katie said, laughing. Hope. Nan was the youngest, still trying out life, not quite ready for the responsibilities of a relationship. I hoped I'd be around long enough to see her fall in love. I bet it would scare her. How does he not have someone? He seems like a serious type, and he's handsome enough to attract anyone he wants. Katie was silent for a few minutes. He could have gone off with a different woman every night if he wanted, but that's not how he's wired. He would have killed me if I told you that, but he was already married. It didn't end well. Who changed? Nobody. They had been together for 5 years, married for 4, when the accident occurred. It was not their fault. The logging truck was not properly secured, and the load shifted as they passed by. She died instantly, and he was severely injured. It led to his hand becoming the way it is. As far as I know, he hasn't dated since she died, and that was 3 years ago. The worst thing was that they were going to her parents too. Inform them that they will become grandparents in 5 months. The car fell silent as we digested what she said. I couldn't imagine the pain he must have felt. On the other hand, maybe I could. I was also once married. To say it ended badly is an understatement. The first year was bliss, and then I got pregnant. I didn't plan it. I was on pills, but they let me down. Bo was terribly upset because he was happy receiving all my attention. He even made an appointment for me at the clinic for the procedure, since he was not planning on having a child, and when we arrived at the clinic, I immediately called an Uber and left him standing alone. Carrie Ann was a wonderful child. Both families enthusiastically agreed. Bo refused to even touch her, which caused an outcry from his mother. His attitude did not change, and although I was in pain, all the worries fell on me. If it weren't for the help of my grandparents, I wouldn't have managed it. When Carrie started school, he became even more distant. We often argued after she fell asleep, but he refused to interact with her. She eventually learned to ignore him, but I could see that she was suffering. When she was 5 years old, he started hitting me. Now, looking back, I don't understand why I didn't leave after the first time, but I still hoped that we could eventually become a family, and I held on to it. Then he went too far. I turned on full protection mode, and we got into a fight. The police came and arrested him. My daughter and I went to A&E, where we were examined and photographed before speaking to a consultant. By that time, I was ready for a divorce and hired a lawyer. It took him 3 weeks to get out of jail because his parents and none of his friends were willing to post bail for him. When he came out, divorce papers and a restraining order were waiting for him. In response, he came and beat me again. As soon as he appeared, I called the police, and perhaps only they saved me from death. I remember smiling through the pain of how they carefully arrested him because he resisted. The judge was unhappy that he violated the restraining order so quickly, denied bail, and ordered a psychological evaluation. They concluded that he had anger problems. What a discovery. He remained in jail for 4 months, undergoing therapy until they decided he was ready to return to society. By then, his parents, encouraged by his counseling, had posted bail and hired him a lawyer. As a result, he was released for time served with the condition of continuing consultations. I knew he was free, but I had never seen him, and gradually I began to relax. 6 months later, I was having dinner with a male friend from work, helping him plan a surprise birthday party for his wife. Angela and Tim were on their way, but we arrived early and were having drinks when he attacked me again. He came in, saw me with a man, and made the wrong conclusions. The police received him again. Bo was again denied bail. His sentence went into effect, and he was charged with violating a restraining order and 2 counts of felony assault causing serious bodily injury. He ended up under the same judge, who, after finding him guilty on all counts, gave him the maximum sentence. He received a minimum of 4 years and 5 months if he behaves well. Considering Bo, I doubted it was possible. Carrie Ann was 9 at the time and still had almost a year until his release. He wrote to me from prison, long letters of apology, declaring his love for me and his hope for a reunion after his release. After the first 3, I stopped reading them, but on the advice of my divorce lawyer, I saved them all by putting them in boxes. He wrote an average of 8 letters a week. I was still close to his parents, and they were so shocked by his behavior that they didn't visit him for almost 2 years. His mother told me after the second visit how much he had changed and how worried she was about what would happen when he came out. I extended the restraining order, just in case. As you can see, I had serious problems with allowing a man close to me again. Things change, life moves on, and sometimes you just have to deal with it. Mom worked not because it was necessary, but because she wanted to. She often said that she would go crazy within a month if she just hung around our big house. Dad died suddenly without warning, but he was always a planner and had enough life insurance to provide for Mom for life. He paid off his home and car insurance, took out 3 different life insurance policies, one of which was unknown to us, and he even took out a small policy on which I was a beneficiary. A smart man, he arranged it so that if I was still married, payments would begin when Carrie turned 18. It would at least help pay for her college. If I had been single, I would have gotten the money right away, and I got divorced 5 months before he died. My ex called demanding his half. "I'll send you a check," I promised, and indeed I did. For 10 cents, with a note, "It's more than you're worth, but my banker said it can't be cashed out for less. Try not to spend foolishly." His hysteria, which I recorded, set a record even for him. I gave the tape to my lawyer, who gave it to the judge, who shared it with Bo's lawyer with the warning: no contact, no calls, no Facebook messages, no Instagram messages, no means of communication including smoke signals. If he violates this, he will get more time. Let him understand. He didn't understand, and it cost him an extra prison sentence. Since Mom worked, I needed someone to watch Carrie Ann from the time she got off the school bus until I got home from work, about 2 hours. One of my mom's old friends was doing this. She lived on a fixed income, and the extra money, although small, helped her. Now she was suddenly left without after-school care. Mrs. Rosemond died in her sleep, holding a photograph of her husband, with a smile on her face. My boss was nice to me, so he let me leave early to meet the bus for 2 weeks until I could find another nanny. A week passed, and I still hadn't found anyone, and I started to panic. Then one day I found my mother at home, without Carrie. Where's Carrie? She's with the new nanny, getting to know each other. They seem to be getting along, and I like it. Give them another hour, and then we'll pick them up. We talked while preparing dinner, and I realized how much I liked it. My mom was always teaching me new things, things that came in handy as I grew up, things that I came to appreciate more and more as I got older. Finally, she dried her hands and decided it was time to go. We went outside and passed her car, and she smiled. "Let's walk. It's only a block, and the weather is beautiful. I think you'll like Mrs. Pike." It was a beautiful house with many flower beds, perfectly manicured, and I wondered who the gardener was. Mom didn't stop at the front door, but went to the kitchen door, knocking lightly. Carrie Ann opened the door abruptly, a smile barely large enough to fit on her face. "Mom, Grandma, I baked cookies." There was a pleasant smell coming from the house. Carrie was wearing an apron that fit surprisingly well, and I expected to see the kitchen in chaos after the battle. But everything was neat, and if not for the smell of cookies, I would never have believed that the kitchen had been recently used. Carrie dragged me towards a woman, not much bigger than herself, but perfectly proportioned for her height, and very attractive for her age, which I thought was about 40. She smiled and extended her hand. "Hi, Rosamund Pike. You have a wonderful daughter, very polite. I think we'll get along great. I haven't had a child this size in the house for a long time. My son is a long time old and hasn't had children yet. I ordered 4, but we'll see." Mom smiled as she followed her. "Cookies, Roz." I was going to bake them anyway, and Carrie wanted to learn. She made all the mixture, and I did the baking. They're almost ready. Coffee while we wait. We settled down at the kitchen table while Carrie eagerly watched the timer. After 3 minutes, it went off, and Mrs. Pike put on gloves and took out the cookies, placing them on the cooling rack. The smell was delicious. "What kind of cookies are these?" "These are cookies with M&Ms and coconut flakes. They're pretty much my son's favorite treat. I think he can smell them a mile away." We finished our coffee, and although dinner wasn't ready yet, we ate 1 cookie each. They melted in your mouth, still warm and sticky. The coconut flakes were a nice touch. They baked 2 dozen, and Mrs. Pike insisted that Carrie take a dozen home. Mom smiled, knowing that we would have to guard them like Fort Knox, otherwise they would disappear in 2 days. I asked how much she would charge to babysit Carrie, and she hugged me. "I should pay you. Your daughter is beautiful. How about 50 a week?" "This is too little. You clearly have no idea how much kindergartens cost today. It's only a couple of hours, and I like the company. When Henry meets her, you might not take her. He always wanted a daughter, but we only ended up having 1 child." A shadow flashed across her face, and I realized there was more behind it. She shrugged. "Anyway, this is my offer. Take it or not, as businessmen say." I accepted it. Carrie chatted all the way home about how happy she had been lately. "Grandma Pike will let me help in her garden. We're going to plant zucchini, cucumbers, and 4 different varieties of tomatoes. Can we start a garden?" I winced. One of the things I inherited from my mom was black toe. We tried for years, and it just didn't work. Perhaps Carrie can break this chain. We talked about it, looked at some things online, and decided that container gardens were what we needed. Mom said she would buy 5 or 6, and we argued for hours before we decided on 2 tomatoes, 2 trellis cucumbers, and 2 zucchini. This plan fell apart when she announced that Grandpa Henry would be coming to build boxes for us on Saturday. She coaxed me until I agreed, and she ran to the computer to look at ideas for drawers. I looked at my mother, and she smiled. He was almost as excited as she was. I don't know if you remember, Roz was talking about how much they missed their daughter, and he thinks that's even better. This way he can turn her head, make her too excited, and then send him home to us when she starts to annoy him. But I doubt that will ever happen. This is happening too fast, don't you think? I agree, but that's how the whole family is. When they take on something, they do it with all their might, and Carrie will probably be better off for having a positive male role model in her life. She was right about that. After her father, Carrie found it difficult to communicate with any man, even those who did not want her harm. I took her to therapy for almost 2 years, and it helped, but she was still wary. 7 o'clock on Saturday morning came too early, and Carrie practically dragged me out of bed. "Get up, Mom. They'll be here soon." I wandered into the kitchen, and my mother grinned at me, pointing to the coffee maker. I was halfway through the cup when I heard a truck. Carrie ran towards the door, and we followed more slowly. There was a large pickup truck in the driveway with boards sticking out of the back. One of the biggest men I've ever seen stepped out from behind the wheel. I later learned that he was 6 feet 6 inches tall and weighed about 280 pounds, which did not make him look fat on such a large frame. He had a beard, a baseball cap, and looked like a redskin on steroids. Carrie screamed and jumped into his arms, surprising me to my core. She was on his hip as he walked up the driveway, and his smile was as wide as hers. He extended his huge paw. "Hi, I'm Henry Pike, Rosaline's husband. You must be Abigail." "Abby," I answered automatically as my hand disappeared into his huge paw. I smiled because he was radiating good feelings, and then I smiled even wider when I thought of the old saying, "Big hands, big legs, big manhood," and wondered how little Roz was coping with him. He smiled when he heard another door slam behind him. A man who looked familiar walked around the truck, and as he came closer, I recognized him. It was Kyle, and I immediately made the connection. Rose and Henry were his parents. "Hey, Kyle, you're up so early." I knew he was playing last night, and the bar closed at 1. "Yeah," he smiled. "Something about building garden beds and a persistent little girl got me up early." I was about to apologize to him when I saw Carrie smile. They refused coffee, wanting to finish before it got hot. Kyle had already measured and cut everything we needed, and once we decided where best to place the beds, they came together quickly. I couldn't help but smile at Carrie, who had a look of concentration on her face as she screwed in the screws to assemble the boxes under Henry's supervision. It turned out to be 4 drawers, quite a lot of space. After thanking them when they finished, I promised to buy compost and topsoil from the garden center to finish them off. "No, you won't," Kyle said as Roz pulled up in another pickup truck. "It'll cost you a pretty penny. We'll do it ourselves." The truck bed was full of forest soil, humus cow dung, and topsoil. He and Henry began pulling out branches from a tree we had cut down years ago, lining the bottom of the bed with them. Then they put a layer of leaves, quite thick. A mixture of soil was poured on top of all this. It's called hugel cropping. It's a technique that uses readily available materials. The wood and leaves decompose over time, creating additional compost, and it holds water much better than a conventional garden bed. We don't use chemical fertilizers or pesticides, but the choice is yours. We only have enough soil for 2 beds, but tomorrow after church we will bring another batch. "Do you go to church?" He looked at me in surprise. "Aren't you?" I haven't walked for years. After Bo, I somehow lost faith. Carrie listened to all this, and before she had time to think, she blurted out, "Can we come with you?" "It's up to your mom, honey. If she doesn't want to go and gives permission, we'll pick you up." She made puppy dog eyes. "Please, Mom." He saw Minya draw and gave me a way out. "Think about it. I have to go. Us old men need a rest before work tonight. Do you have the list of plants I gave you?" Her eyes lit up. "Yeah, Mom and Grandma are going to take me to pick them up this afternoon." Well, this was news to both me and Mom, and I thought about it as she hugged everyone, kissing Rose. She looked so happy she could burst. Carrie waved at them until they were out of sight, and Mom smiled at me. "He's free, you know." "Mom, is that enough, please?" She hugged me and promised. I think she may have her fingers crossed behind her back now. Carrie went crazy in the garden center, talking into the ears of the man who was helping us. He was older, perhaps a retiree who wanted to make some money or just get out of the house, and he was very patient with her. We figured she could plant 6 tomato plants in one bed, but he talked her out of it, suggesting she plant 3 in one bed and 3 in another, next to companion plants that tomato pests don't like. She ended up choosing 6 peppers, 3 hot and 3 mild, and marigolds, a natural pest repellent and attractive for pollinators. Carrie also received 3 zucchini plants and 3 cucumbers for another garden bed. The latter was reserved for runner beans, and her assistant recommended a stringless bush variety and sold her a quarter-pound of the tenderette variety, which was more than enough for her small bed. Her enthusiasm far outstripped her skills, but at last they were planted, watered, and ready to grow. The pride in her accomplishments was nice to see, and when she asked if she could use the computer, not for gaming as usual, but to look up gardening tips, I was impressed. The first thing she did after returning home every day was check her garden. She then explored the cucumber trellises, and I was not surprised when Henry and Kyle arrived with half a truckload of bamboo and a spool of twine. Always careful, he prepared the supports ahead of time, and after securing the vertical posts to the bed, they let Carrie install the cross beams while Kyle showed her how to secure the twine, teaching her simple knots. After 2 weeks, she was interested in watching the vines creep upward towards the sun. Carrie now went to church every Sunday with Rose and Henry, waking me up at 8 in the morning to help her get ready. She made new friends at Sunday school and talked about them all the time, until I went with her, but then she turned to me with a special request. Church picnic is next Sunday. Mom, can you and Grandma come with me? How to refuse such a request? To the credit of the event, both Mom and I bought new dresses, and Carrie bought a new short set that she wanted to wear all the time, but I didn't let her wear it until Sunday. We were almost ready to leave when a large SUV pulled into the driveway. Carrie said with a grin, "I forgot to say, but we're going with Uncle Kyle. That's normal, right?" It was impossible to refuse gracefully, and Kyle had a smart suit, so we got into the car. There was little talking along the way, but Kyle seemed happy about it. We arrived early enough to go to Sunday school, and I found myself in a group of people our age or younger, and the discussion of the day was about forgiveness. Kyle spoke out and explained how difficult it was for him to forgive the man who killed his wife. He came to an agreement, realizing that it was just an accident. He then shocked everyone when he revealed how long it took him to forgive God for taking his wife. The leader approached me asking if there was anything I would like to share. My ex-husband was a rapist who sent me to hospital 3 times, and he once hit our then 5-year-old daughter before I finally found the strength to leave. He's due out of prison in less than a year, and I'm spending a lot of time horrified by this moment. Tell me, if you have any words of wisdom, how could I forgive him? For a moment, there was deep silence in the group until the woman tried to think of something to say. To everyone's surprise, Kyle intervened. "You can't forgive him until you're ready. Your heart isn't ready yet, but you'll know when the time comes. I can't even imagine the hell you've been through, but you have to be very strong to survive and raising such a wonderful daughter." For those who don't know, Carrie is Abby's daughter. Can we give you a hug? I received hugs from all 18 men and women in the group. Many women cried for me, and everyone promised to pray for me and my family. Kyle hugged me last, gently enveloping me in his arms. It was very, very nice. Then we went to the sermon, and I was not surprised to see Mom, Roz, and Henry in one pew, and Kyle and Carrie in the front. The intentions were obvious, so I sat down next to my daughter. The preacher was a gentleman with a homely manner that made you want to be good to please him. He ended the sermon with a warning to beware in the world, and, if given the chance to help someone who is lost, to do so. I looked down during the last prayer and saw Carrie with her head bowed, holding my hand tightly, and Kyle's hand. She almost jumped for joy when the service ended. The preacher, following an old Southern tradition, stood at the door and shook hands with everyone old enough to understand the gesture. Carrie chatted cheerfully with him, saying that she had to help Grandma Pikes set up the dessert table. I baked M&M cookies. He smiled. "You make sure you save one for me, okay?" "I'll save you too," she said, giggling before running into the annex. "She's a wonderful girl." "Thank you, preacher. I think the church has done her good." "This is not a church," he said, surprising me. "It's a family. It's a place where she feels like she belongs, where she feels safe. The church is just a building, but it's what's inside that makes all the difference." He smiled as he said this, and it seemed to me that this man was much more than he seemed. He talked to Kyle and Henry for a second before Carrie came back to me. "Come on, Mom. I need help." She held my hand, practically dragged me along with her, and I waved to everyone as we left. The annex was a place of active activity. Women walked here and there with a determined look. Lunch was planned outside, under the trees, but the ladies wanted everything to be as fresh as possible, and potato salad does not tolerate bright sunlight well. When Carrie told me we should bring a dish, her serious face made me want to do something better than usual. I sometimes made a casserole with lots of chili, onions, tomatoes, and a spicy relish with fresco and pepper jack cheeses, which Carrie loved. I made two versions, one with chicken and one with small strips of beef, in the largest casserole dishes we had. Mom decided to cook something too. Bought 10 pounds of chicken breasts, chopped strips, lightly fried them in spices, then put them in a pan with butter and wing sauce. I hoped no one had a sensitive stomach. I was assigned to help put disposable tablecloths on the tables and prepare the drinks table. My friend Katie helped me, smiling with happiness. "So, you and Kyle?" "No, not me and Kyle. I like him. He seems like a nice person, but he's never shown interest in me, and I'm just not ready for a man in my life yet." Katie really wanted us to be together for some reason. I think the main thing is because her husband Doug and Kyle were very good friends, and married people don't like single people in their circle. This disrupts their sense of order. Don't belittle this man, darling. He may not say much, but when you're together, his eyes seem to follow you. Maybe you should give him a little push. I suddenly raised my head and noticed that his gaze was really focused on me. Of course, Carrie was holding his hand, pulling him forward. "Come on, Mom, it's time to eat." The tables seemed to be bursting with the weight of the food, and the hubbub was like a dull rumble. Children of all ages circled around, most of them glancing at the food, especially the dessert table. The preacher called us together with a short prayer, giving thanks for food and fellowship, expressing hopes for the future, but keeping it short and to the point. The ladies made an informal arrangement, and we made sure the children were served first. I was about to help Carrie, but Mom and Roz intercepted her, putting her between them. I warned Carrie not to overeat, but her plate was still too full. We then helped the elderly who could not wait in line by finding out their preferences and bringing them food. The 80-year-old woman I was helping started crying a little, and I thought she was missing company in her life. She hugged me and kissed me on the cheek. I grabbed a plate for myself, and Katie waved for me to come over. Kyle stood up and made room for me to sit between them. I looked up to see Carrie literally stuffing food into her mouth, but Mom and Roz were smiling as they watched us. Kyle seemed to notice this too, because he leaned towards me with a slight smile on his face. "Am I paranoid, or do you also suspect a conspiracy? Your mother is thinking about what kind of wedding dress to sew. Mine is already trying you out for a tuxedo." He laughed, a warm, quiet laugh that made me smile. Mom is a big fan of lace and pearls. Mine is obsessed with old Bond films, so I imagine she'll want to see you in a 60s tuxedo, complete with bow tie and sparkly white shirt. We will look like a beautiful couple. Even the shortcomings that I have will eclipse your beauty. I blushed to the roots, thinking about the clever words he uttered. Katie turned the conversation to my casserole. She tried a small piece of each type. Her husband took a large portion of beef. I need to find out who made this and get the recipe. I'll email it to you. Did you do it? Please don't look so surprised. Katie, yes, I prepared it. Well, you're doing great, honey. Right, Doug? Doug made noises of approval. His mouth was full. We headed to the dessert table afterwards. I thought I'd be so full I wouldn't need dessert until I got there. It took me a long time to decide between black walnut or fresh coconut, but I chose coconut. Kyle took a piece of black walnut, as well as 2 of Carrie's cookies. Carrie smiled when she saw them. With a feeling of guilt, I also took one so that she would not be upset. She left her parents and sat between us, holding a plate on which was a piece of lemon cake and also a piece of chocolate cake. I thought it was too much for a little girl, but she surprised me by insisting that we share everything. My coconut cake was great. Then I tried black walnut and reconsidered my choice. Carrie spooned out pieces of pie to us with forks, and I really liked the chocolate one, but Kyle preferred the lemon one. Carrie accidentally got chocolate on her cheek, and Kyle wiped it off with his finger, then licked it. She laughed, so I leaned over and licked the rest. She squealed with laughter, and it became clear to me that this was the happiest moment I had ever seen her. I was surprised when it was over to see men clearing tables and collecting trash. The women tended to the leftover food and Tupperware, which bloomed like flowers after the rain. Mom came prepared, and we took home 2 containers of food and 2 desserts. We won't have to cook for a couple of days. It seemed like a lot of care went into packaging for the seniors, making sure they could enjoy the food for days to come. I think me hugged on this day more than ever in my life, mostly people I have never met. Later, at home, I reflected on the day. I had mixed feelings about religion, and my husband taught me that praying for help is sometimes useless. It got me thinking, if God doesn't care about me, why should I care about him? It was a shock to me when I thought about it, how cynical and distrustful I had become. Maybe Bo knocked the faith out of me. Maybe I didn't have much of it to begin with. On the other hand, Carrie was blossoming in the way I had always hoped. She spent her days with Roz now. This helped her take care of her garden, which she carefully tended without allowing weeds or grass to invade her kingdom. I have a photo of her in ratty shorts and a worn-out t-shirt. It was her dirt work suit, and she was holding the first cucumber of the season, the first thing she had ever grown. I tripled the amount I gave to Rosaline, despite her objections. I knew she didn't need the money, but justice is justice. Mom would often stop by when she finished work, spend an hour or so with them, and bring her home by the time I got home from work. When Henry was home, she followed him around, helping him with projects. She brought home a very nice birdhouse that she had helped build and waited impatiently for Henry to dig the hole and install it. She told me that if the birds were around, they would eat insects that could damage her garden. I suspected that they would also eat beneficial insects, but I remained silent. Henry warned her that if she got too close, they would leave the nest, so she kept her distance. They were used to her working in her small garden and would sit on the tomato stakes, chirping at her, sometimes diving to grab a worm that she had dug up and placed far enough away that they felt comfortable taking it. I still went out with the girls on Thursdays, and we often went to the club where our friends played. Kyle and Billy made it a point to sit with us during breaks for 2 reasons. 1, they loved us, and 2, if they sat with us and not at the group table, the ladies who wanted to get to know them would retreat. There was quite a lively discussion about which of us belonged to whom, but they left them alone. Then one night they did a line dance, and I was on the dance floor, twirling and stuttering, when I noticed Kyle was next to me, smiling. The group would often give each other a break by playing something one might sit to give them a chance to have a dance or two with their wives and girlfriends. He was a pretty good dancer, and we were having fun, and then all of a sudden the group broke into a slow waltz. He looked up to see that all the guys were smiling, as were the girls at my table. I suspected a conspiracy. No matter, he was here, I was here, and soon I found myself in his arms as he gently twirled me around the dance floor. They stretched the 4-minute song to 8, and I got lost in the dance, only returning to reality when I found myself standing on the dance floor, the song long over. I blushed and hurried back to the table before the band started playing a fast song. That was absolutely adorable, darling. Look. Autumn showed me a video on her phone. I looked happy as I laid my head on his chest and pressed myself against him, and he held me tighter than necessary. with that same half-smile on his face. I've been around him long enough to know that this is one of his signs that he's happy. What shocked me was the way my face moved toward his when the music stopped. I was almost there when I realized the music had ended and turned away abruptly. Kyle looked a little disappointed before he smiled again. I thought about that almost kiss the following Tuesday after I got home. Carrie picked 3 zucchinis, and Roz gave her the recipe. She was in the kitchen with her mother, making lasagna using thinly sliced vegetable pieces instead of noodles. Mom let her use the cutter, making sure her fingers weren't too close. Mom made the sauce, and she let Carrie spoon in the mixture along with more ricotta cheese, baking it until the cheese on top was brown and bubbly. There was also dessert banana pudding. They were both smiling, and I knew I was being buttered up. After cleaning the kitchen, she settled down between us on the sofa. When she thought I was in a good mood and relaxed, she revealed her plan. Mom, church camp starts in 2 weeks. 1 week, Monday through Sunday. It's on the lake, and there will be 4 churches full of kids. Can I go? Please, please, please. Maria is going too. Let's talk about it. Do you have any literature? Maybe a website I could look at. How much does it cost? How well will you be looked after? Carrie smiled and handed me some brochures, and while I was reading them, she found a website. The camp looked nice, well-maintained, and had a very high satisfaction rating. I thought the cost was a little high and wondered how Maria's mother handled it. They were officially living below the poverty line. Her father had long since moved back to Honduras, leaving her to struggle with a small child. She attracted attention at the church, and suddenly new programs appeared for her mother. They were moved into an apartment with rental assistance, and various church members donated furniture or came together to buy it. One of the parishioners was shocked by her work with long hours and low wages, and offered her a job in his factory for almost double the salary. It helped, but not too much. Carrie and Maria became good friends, and Roz offered to babysit the children, refusing to take money for it. Mom often went for them, and they were often at our house. Maria was a sweet child, but very shy. It took 4 months before she came out of her shell, and she had the sweetest smile. Looks good, honey. Let's see if I can find the money. Both fell silent. What? Roz and I split the cost as a birthday gift. We got a discount, but it came with a condition. We have to provide a counselor. I got a bad feeling. And I can't take a vacation. I checked, and Roz can't go either. If you don't go, you'll have to look for someone else. I didn't like the thought of a bunch of strangers surrounding my daughter for days. Okay, I'll go. I tried to look happy while Mom grinned and Carrie screamed and hugged me. After everything had calmed down and she had spoken on the phone with Maria, Mom cleared her throat. There is something else? Yes, dear, there is. The camp requires 2 chaperones per church, 1 man and 1 woman. Who am I stuck with? If it's that assistant pastor, then I stay home. When I catch him looking at me, I very much doubt that his thoughts are pure, and he scares me. Didn't you hear? He was reassigned to missions. I think he volunteered. I didn't say that, but that's what I thought. If he volunteered, it was only to quickly get out of the city. Instead, I simply said that I hope he has found his true calling. So who am I stuck with? Kyle. Mom couldn't hide her grin and Carrie couldn't hide her grin, but I let it go. At least he was a good guy. Suddenly, the list appeared, and the very first item for me was a good swimsuit. Something modest, although I wasn't a fan of the whole piece. I went shopping, taking most of the girls with me and telling them what I was looking for. They giggled, and everywhere I went, they all had to try something on and criticize everything I chose. Autumn went online and found what she called the perfect suit. The top was conservative and the bottom was high-waisted, a style that seemed to be all the rage. I tried it on and loved it until I turned around. It also sat high in the back, but showed off my bum. But I had to admit it looked good, and by sliding it down slightly, I thought I could pass the conservative test. Katie laughed and tugged, making it look like a thong. That's all? Please. Monday morning came all too early and Kyle pulled up in his big SUV at 7. It was 5 hours before camp and we wanted to be there early to get settled. He had already picked up Maria and she flew out of the car, all with jet black hair and shiny white teeth. They hugged and danced for a few minutes while Kyle and I loaded up. He grinned when he saw the 2 suitcases. You know it's only for a week, right? Shut up. Went. We had a good time, though, and stopped for breakfast at one of those places to eat. The girls ate their fill of waffles and bacon. Kyle chose sausage and egg, hash browns, gravy, and biscuits. I looked at the food and decided that this was a vacation after all, and I got the same thing, with ham. When we got back to the car, we were full and the girls were already asleep, cuddled together, before we had driven 10 miles. Kyle and I were talking quietly, and the next thing I knew, he shook my shoulder. Wake up. We are here. It's time to go out. I realized that I was pressed against him, but instead of moving away, I just pressed closer. Oh, should I? Yes, you should, came from behind, and I turned around and saw both girls with wide smiles. Okay, then let's go. We were there an hour before official check-in, but the place was already swarming with little girls and boys. Some were packing up to leave with sad faces, but most had just arrived and were jumping all over the place, including my 2. The coordinators gave us an overview of what was expected. We want these kids to have a good time. Some of them are from the inner city or disadvantaged areas, and this nature is completely new to them, so they will be a little nervous. Girls and boys are from the suburbs, and it will be calmer and easier to work with them. There are a few rules, but they are strictly followed. No fights. This will allow you to quickly return home. Be polite. Do not leave the shelter after curfew. Emergency declared by the chief resident. They are between 14 and 15 years old and very well trained. We also counsel 12 and 13-year-olds about summer romance. Your age group will not require as much attention, but still watch them closely. There were 6 overnight stays for girls and the same number for boys, divided by age. 8 children slept together, and there was a smaller room next to the door for the consultant. Men and women were also housed in bunkhouses, with 4 people per building. They outlined the activities available to them and what problems they should pay attention to, including homesickness. We usually keep them so busy that they don't have time, but sometimes separation anxiety gets into their head. We have a certified counselor on staff who can help them, but some can't handle it and their parents have to come and help them. This happens very rarely, usually 2 per summer. It hurts us every time. When everyone arrived, the girls and boys were lined up in random order to be assigned to their bunks. It all came down to the luck of the draw. The child walked over and pulled the colored disc out of the bucket until they were all gone. They lined up and named the colors. Blue go. Yellow is in the row behind them. Red in a row near the canoe. Green at the office steps. Black by. Continued until the children were sorted and taken to their sleeping quarters. I admired their system, and for good reason. Some children, like Maria and Carrie, would have preferred to stay together, but this way they met new people and learned to get along with them. The girls were a little disappointed that they had drawn the wrong color, but they were soon jumping up and down with excitement and went to pack their things. The adults were shown their quarters, and although they were smaller than I liked, they looked very comfortable. I was surprised that they don't have cooks. Each color was assigned breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and they alternated, so most only had to do it once every 3 days. And the kids had to help with the cooking and make sure the dining room and kitchen were clean and in good condition for the next team. It will teach them responsibility and also how to work as a team. This works well unless there is a princess in the bunkhouse. The team has to make her pull her weight. This usually doesn't happen in your age group, but it's still something to keep an eye on. I look at Kyle and grin, knowing that the adults and counselors will be doing most of the cooking. Gathering 10-year-olds around a hot stove is not a good idea. Then we split up, went to our bunkhouse, and unpacked our things. My roommates seemed nice to me, despite the little time I had to talk to them. Dee was a small woman, no more than 5 feet tall, and at 48, she was the oldest of us. Vicky was the complete opposite, 6 feet tall and 260 pounds. She was my age, just over 30, and seemed to be simply seething with happiness. Carol was the quietest, but seemed sweetest and the youngest at 27 years old. If she had a 10-year-old child here, she looked very young. No one had to cook that evening. The staff took care of that and allowed us to adjust. Carrie and Maria were happy to be here, but sad that they weren't bunkmates. I tried to support them, saying that this would be a good experience for them. They hugged Kyle as the groups separated by age and gathered around the fires, roasting marshmallows. Carrie and Maria insisted that Kyle bring his guitar and asked him to play a few songs before bed. This set the tone for the rest of the week. They played, studied, made new friends, then gathered around the fire and sang. The first night they were a little hesitant until they heard another group of older tourists singing and decided they would be louder. After that it was quite frequent and loud. He played about 5 or 6 times, and then went to the shower and went to bed. I checked every bunkhouse to make sure everything was okay and ended up being the mother of several homesick girls. By the 3rd day they were done with it, engrossed in everything. On the 2nd day, all the girls and boys from our shelter gathered at the tables in the dining room. Beads and small polished stones stood on trays. They had to create necklaces that reflected their colors. Our group was blue, so they got a lot of blue and neutral beads to work with. Instead of each doing it alone, the girls worked together, choosing the design they liked best and making them the same, except each had a small, different colored stone to highlight their individuality. The centerpiece of each was a small silver cross. The boys looked at the design, and some of them came up with ideas which they used, and they were divided into groups of 4, building their totem as they called it. I was proud to note that their groups looked the best because most of the others were just random groups of beads. All counselors were forced to serve. I knew how to operate a canoe, so I led this activity along with the senior counselors. Some capsized, but all had to put on life jackets and managed to get them under control on the 3rd day. Kyle headed the carpentry shop, cutting out patterns for birdhouses that campers could assemble. Carol then watched them as they drew them, making the drawing as personal as possible. It would seem that Carol was an artist and gave them a lot of useful advice. One of the other adult men was a retired park ranger, so he led the nature hikes, showing them some edible wild foods, including a couple of blueberry patches. He marked them for those times when our group needed to cook and we were stuck with breakfast. The day before, he told the tourists to gather as many people as possible for pancakes. Everyone had to get up early to prepare food, and dragging a bunch of 10-year-olds at 6 in the morning wasn't as easy as one might think. Some were tasked with setting the table, and 6 boys broke eggs to cook scrambled eggs. 6 girls kneaded pancake batter, laughing and adding blueberries. Others served, placing plates of pancakes, eggs, and bacon on the table. I thought we had made too many pancakes, but then there were none left, so we ended up with 3 on average. Those who were not involved in the preparations had to clean up, preparing the hall for the next group of vacationers. Despite all the entertainment, the children were allowed 2 hours during the day to do whatever they wanted. Most chose to swim in the lake, and there were at least 3 certified lifeguards on duty at all times. Other than a few cases of poison ivy and bites from infected insects, no one was injured. There was a 3/4 moon, bright enough to be seen without a flashlight, and I noticed someone sitting in a chair by the lake. Wondering who it was, I started investigating. It was Kyle, and he sat hunched over, his shoulders seeming to shake. I touched his shoulder gently, and he jumped, looking back to see who it was. I saw traces of tears on his face. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." It was a large double chair, so I sat next to it. "No, that's not true." What's happening? He waved his hand. This, please don't get me wrong, I love being here. But sometimes, when the kids are laughing, playing in the water, or trying to learn something new, I think about the family I lost. Molly would be just over 4 now if she were alive, and I wonder if I will ever find again the happiness that I had with my wife all these years, and I still miss her like she did when I was here just yesterday. I followed my instincts and hugged him, trying to envelop him in a cocoon of love. We stayed together for a while before he straightened up. Thank you. You're welcome. You and I, we're from opposite ends of the spectrum. You had a close-knit family and a loving wife. I was raised by one mother and married to a scoundrel of epic proportions. Looking at you, I envy the time I spent with your wife. There's an old song about finding out what love is and being shown it. I envy you because you had it, so you know exactly what it is. Sometimes I think I'll never experience it. I don't know what's worse, having it and losing it, or never knowing at all. He smiled, his teeth glinting in the moonlight. You will find it. You have too many good things not to be found. You are attractive, you are kind, you have a beautiful daughter. It will probably happen when you least expect it, from someone who will completely surprise you. I hope I see it. Then it happened. I kissed him. I don't know where it came from or how long it would have lasted, but when the laughter came from the night, we quickly turned around. I looked up and saw Carol, and she was smiling. I thought you were lost, dear, so I decided to check. But I don't think you need help. Continue. She left. Another laugh sounded behind her, leaving us embarrassed and dumb. Finally, he spoke. Abby, don't you dare ruin this. We both needed this, and at least I will never forget. If I ever feel sad and need a good memory, this will be among the first. So don't overdo it, darling, and give me one more kiss. Then I smiled and laughed too, standing up. Good night, dear. Sweet dreams. He was still sitting there as I walked up the steps to my hut to see each woman looking out of the windows. I opened the door, still smiling. Show's over, girls. Everyone go to bed. Yes, that's how it happened. Instead, we sat and talked for 2 hours. They asked me if Kyle was my boyfriend. When I said, not yet, they laughed. We talked about hopes and dreams, disappointments and pain, like a group of 13-year-old girls in one of the booths below. When I fell asleep, the last thing I saw were gentle eyes and a soft smile. There were many tears and hugs as we prepared to leave, promises of Zooms and texts flowing as we said goodbye. Carrie and Maria hugged as if they had been separated for a month, remembering all the good times they had shared. I knew they would have tons of photos on their phones ready to be shared. Maria didn't have a phone. Her mother couldn't afford one, so I made sure to buy an inexpensive phone from my carrier and put her on my plan so she could make memories. They huddled together, leafing through them, occasionally admiring them, and then fell silent. When 10-year-old girls go silent, you need to check. Are you okay, girls? Explosion of laughter. We're okay, Mom. Look. It was a photo of me and Kyle as we accompanied the sing-alongs and we held hands. I don't even remember how it happened, but I didn't care. He looked at it, blushed, and I just said it was a good photo. He dropped the girls and me off at the house. They ran to their mother with their phones. She herded them inside while we unloaded. Kyle looked as awkward as I've ever seen him, and it made me smile. Do you want to say something, Kyle? He blushed, then smiled. I haven't asked a woman out on a date in 6 years, so I'm a little out of whack. Would you like to go to dinner or a movie with me? I'll understand if you refuse. I haven't thought about a man romantically in a while, and neither have you, darling. So, with that in mind, I'm doing both. Dinner and then a movie. When would you like to pick me up? Thursday. We'll go out for an early dinner, and then you can pick a movie. Anything but horror. Is that okay? Do you really have to play on Thursday? They can do without me for one night. Besides, I warned them in advance not to expect a long-term commitment from me. maybe I have more important things to do. The fact that he chose me over his group made me a little proud. Let's go to dinner at 6:30 so we can catch an early show. Nothing fancy. A buffet or pizza will be just fine. I hope you can handle the romance, because there's a movie I've been wanting to see for a long time. When he left, I kissed him, wanting him to think about the upcoming date. I turned around and saw two 10-year-old girls and a grandmother smiling. Not a word, I said as I carried the suitcase into the house. That didn't stop them from smiling. Thursday finally arrived, and I must have struggled with what to wear for 2 hours before Carrie laid my prettiest summer dress on my bed. Put this on, it's his favorite. How do you know? She rolled her eyes. I'm 10, Mom, not 2. Now listen to me. Don't ruin this. I've put as much into this as you have, and you shouldn't have to guess how I want this to end. Are you sure you're 10? She just smiled and left, leaving me to get dressed. Frankly, I was scared, but I reassured myself that he was probably more nervous than me. I was right. After several stuttering, he relaxed, and we chatted on the way to the restaurant. He took me to a nice steakhouse, and I remember the food was great, barely. When I told him what movie I wanted to see, he smiled slightly but took the tickets. I declined the popcorn and drink, admitting that I had a bottle of water in my purse. Movie snack prices were astronomical, and I wasn't about to make him spend $20 on popcorn and soda. It was a best-selling novel, and I was glad to see that whoever wrote the script stuck to the storyline. I couldn't imagine how it could be better in any other case. Even though I knew what was going to happen, I still cried at the end, hugging Kyle. It felt right and safe. It amazed me that for the first time I felt safe in the arms of a man. When the credits rolled, I kissed him. I held his hand as we walked out, and it would have taken dynamite or a natural disaster to make me let it go. He seemed happy with that, so when we buckled up and headed out, I took his hand again. I was greeted at home by a smiling mother. It's a good date, I'll take it. Very. She hugged me. You know, I never liked Bo, or any of your guys for that matter. Kyle practically has great son-in-law tattooed on his forehead. Carrie will be grown up soon, and I could certainly use a couple more grandchildren. I've never heard her speak so positively about a man. I am going to sleep. Trying not to stay up late choosing names for your children. KJ for Kyle Jr. If it's a boy, Rosalind Violet for girls. Roz and I discussed it. She giggled at the expression on my face as she walked to her bedroom. So we met and became closer. Much closer. He invited me to his house for the 7th date, and I was impressed. An old, rambling 4-bedroom farmhouse that was in excellent condition, from the brand-new tin roof to the polished wood floors. I wandered around looking at the photographs. I froze when I reached one of the photographs of his wife. She seemed to radiate love and was very attractive. In one photo, she and Kyle sat on a porch swing, huddled together. I saw Bo and compared him to what I saw. Kyle definitely wins this comparison. He stood behind me in the hall with his arm around my waist. She was very beautiful. She was like that, and her inner beauty outshone her appearance. Part of me will probably always miss her. But enough about that. Wine. A little later I found out that he almost never drinks and called his mother to ask for recommendations. It was an excellent wine, and I praised it. He shrugged, smiling. I don't drink enough to know the difference, but your mom helped, and I have a friend who owns a winery and a stand-alone liquor store, and he said it was a good choice. If you want, I can take you to the winery sometime. In October, he often goes on haunted float rides. I bet Carrie would love it. It was August. The fact that he was hoping for everything to happen in October made him feel fired up. I looked at several awards hanging on his wall from his company. Kyle, I never asked what you do for a living. I am the production manager at a pipe factory. There are practically no textile products, but the demand for them is still quite good. We produce a lot of toilet paper rolls as well as paper towels. My plant specializes in industrial applications, pipes up to 3 inches thick and up to 36 inches wide. Most of them are used to fill building forms, especially columns. He suddenly grinned. It's a lot more interesting than you think. Do you like your job? I love it, but I'm basically just a working drone. I don't have to help make decisions. I just follow orders. It can be incredibly boring at times. Looks like you need some career advancement. I grinned. For what? Another boring job. I wasn't able to graduate from community college, let alone get a 4-year degree, so my options are limited. You can always go back to school. I'm sure between your mom, my mom and dad, and me, Carrie will be taken care of. Think about it. I vowed to myself to think about it seriously, but not right now. We kissed. Kyle made a move that reminded me of Bo and gave me a panic attack. He helped me come to my senses. I love you, Abby, and I would die protecting you if I had to. You're safe with me. Then the plumbing really started, strong screams that seemed to last forever, gradually turning into whimpers, and then I fell asleep. After breakfast, we talked. I talked about the fear I had lived with for so long, and he talked about how hard it was to leave his wife behind. We are a pair of damaged souls, darling. Let's see if we can heal each other. I didn't want to leave, but I got dressed, and he took me home. I don't know who grinned harder, Mom or Carrie. Kyle seemed a little confused, but I kissed him and told him in a voice loud enough for them to hear. I had a really good time last night, honey. We're going to do a lot of this in the future. I grinned at their open mouths and went inside. Mom seemed to be questioning me, but I carefully stopped her. Right now, Mom, what happens between me and Kyle stays between us. Let this relationship develop at its own pace. This, however, did not stop Mom, Roz, and Carrie from keeping their heads together at every opportunity, but they were silent about it. I made it a point to spend at least one night on the weekend with Kyle. One night I was in a beautiful dress, the next day in a thin t-shirt, and finally I went to bed naked. He just watched as I slipped into bed. I kissed him before asking him a question. Kyle, are you ever going to make love to me? I need to know because I'm tired of waiting. What is holding you back? He became completely silent and began to speak in a low voice. My wife. I loved her with all my heart and soul, and we made promises that I find hard to break. I'm sorry, I want you more than you can imagine, but I feel like I'm betraying her. I took his hand and looked into his eyes. That's one of the reasons I love you. Your dedication to what you believe in is unquestionable. But she's gone and I'm here. I don't know if I'll ever be able to get that kind of love from you, but I'd like to spend my whole life trying. Also, if I remember the standard vows correctly, the phrase "till death do you part" says it all. The next weekend Carrie came. At first I was against it, but he explained it to me. She's rightfully our top priority, so it's important that we learn to get along. You're welcome, I said, grinning. If it concerned me or you, it would be a coin toss. This girl loves you, baby. Carrie looked around the house before calling the bedroom and bathing her room. She was also the furthest away from us, so maybe it was a win for both of us. It had been a great weekend, with Carrie following Kyle around, making him show her every inch of his property, all 20-plus acres, including the pond. Carrie smiled when she saw this. Maria and I are having a camping party soon. The two of us, Heather, Mackenzie, Joe, and maybe Carlita will come. Please, parents. Kyle smirked at the designation. You'll learn, baby, that in these situations my first response is, ask your mother. If she doesn't mind, we'll arrange it. Carrie chatted happily all the way home, and I looked down and realized she was standing between us, holding both of our hands. The next couple of weekends I found her and all the grandparents talking in hushed tones. I said something to Kyle, and he grinned. I'm sure it's nothing. Of course, that meant there was something there, and that drove me crazy. On Sunday, Carrie insisted that I go to church, so I dressed up to impress Kyle and went. The men and women in the Sunday school class were grinning like idiots, and even the preacher's smile was wider than usual. All this made me very nervous. His sermon that day was about love between men and women, parents and children, and the love of God. God's love flows through everything, even through the love between a man and a woman. Marriage is the cornerstone of the family, even of God's greatest family. It is an affirmation of all that is holy and good. Well then, when he finally calmed down, he made a statement. Before we went out this morning, one of our members had a special song he asked us to sing. Please remain seated for a few minutes. There was a stage behind the pulpit, darkened during the service, and the lights came on to show Kyle with his small guitar. He checked the microphone and adjusted it before speaking. This song has special meaning, but even more so now. I later learned that Any Day Now was part anthem, part lament. Most thought it was about a person about to be released from prison. Others thought it was about being released from the prison of their body so they could ascend to heaven. In any case, it was beautiful and touching. Any day I'll be released. As their notes sounded, the lights came on, revealing part of the choir and Carrie sitting at the organ, playing beautifully. Mom smiled at her. Roz was giving her lessons before school even ended for the summer. Pretty good, isn't it? When she found out what Kyle was going to do, she insisted on playing with him. The music stopped, but no one moved when Kyle began to speak. This song means a lot to me. I thought about her when I fell in love. I was worried that I was betraying my late wife by finding love again, but now I feel liberated. I loved her very much, but I did not break a single vow that I made to her, because her death freed me, no matter how hard it was for me. The woman I love also told me that most people can go through life and never know what love is. I know without a shadow of a doubt what it is because I had it. In a way, this made it easier to recognize him the second time. Abby, will you join me for a minute? By this point, everyone, including me, knew what was going to happen. I moved forward like a zombie, and he fell to his knees and held out the box. Abby Gleason, will you marry me? Be my life partner until. I'm sure it was a wonderful, touching proposal, but I ruined it by shouting yes and knocked him to the ground. They finally got us up, almost forcing me to let go of Kyle. Carrie started crying and hugged me. Then Kayla. Mom cried and did the same. I think Roz cried the hardest, hugging me until I felt like I might bruise. Even Henry, as he held me almost a foot off the ground in his arms, looked a little glazed over. It took almost an hour to get out of the church. The preacher hugged me last, and when he finished, he handed me a piece of paper. What is this? A list of dates when I will be ready to provide the service. You're not the only ones who fell in love this summer. I chuckled and kissed his cheek. There were a lot of things to do before the wedding, and one of the hardest was telling Beau's parents. I think they expected it, perhaps his mother more than his father. I assured them that they were still Carrie's grandparents and would spend time with her regularly. I think it made them accept the situation a little better. He invited them to the grill along with Roz, Henry, Mom, and her new man. Ralph was a seemingly gentle man, and he was fascinated by his mother. I was happy for her when I found out they spent the night over the weekend while I was with Kyle. Carrie stayed the night with Rose and Henry. Carrie ran from one area to another, and then, as she followed Kyle, I saw a lively discussion of all the grandmothers. They were all smiling, and it felt like they were spending the weekend with Carrie. There were 2 months left before the wedding when we received disturbing news. Beau was released early for good behavior. His mother tried to calm me down by telling me how he had changed and was now a good person. I held judgment because I was still receiving 3 or 4 letters a week. Looking back, I think I should have reread them from time to time. The first thing he did was ask if we could spend some time together. When I said no, he winced. He then demanded to see Carrie. She didn't really want to, but agreed to meet with him in the presence of a social worker. Everything went neither well nor badly. Carrie was indifferent to all this, and this upset him. Don't you want to have a family again? I have a family, 3 sets of grandparents, a mother who loves me, and a father who adores me. His whole behavior changed. What are you talking about? What father? Well, he's not quite my father yet, but he will be in 2 weeks when he and Mom get married. He got up and ran out 30 minutes early, and Carrie was pretty shocked by this conversation. Mom, did I do something wrong? No, honey. Grandma Juliet was going to tell him this weekend, but it's not a big deal. You can still see your father if you want. That's it, Mom. I don't want to see him again. All I remember from my time with him was screaming and pain. I'm afraid of him, Mom. We'll talk to social services, baby, but you might have to see him if he insists. I think I'll forgive his alimony if he lets us go. It would seem that, at least in our state, imprisonment does not exempt alimony. It has been in the making for over 4 years and is quite a significant change. I hoped I could use this to get him to give up any rights to Carrie. She had already lobbied for her name to be the same as ours, and Kyle was all for it. This plan, to put it mildly, failed. I asked for a few minutes after the next visit and laid it out to him. I don't mean to be cruel, Bo, but you are the past. Kyle is our future. I will never be with you again, and next week I will get married again. Carrie loves him. She's afraid of you. Let's move on, Bo. Find another woman, start another family. She might be able to spend time with you later if she wants, but right now all she sees when she's with you is fear and anger. His rant was so bad that the social worker pressed the panic button. Apparently, probation and parole officers were sharing office space, and 2 walked through the door. He threatened our entire family. As a result, he was arrested. His parents were devastated, and he swore it was just a matter of passion, and the judge released him into their custody. The day has come. All the mothers fussed over me, pulling my dress on, all with tears in their eyes. I think it must have been hard for Juliet to watch me while her son was dealing with probation violations, but she smiled and cried as we said our vows. Autumn, Katie, and even Nanette were bridesmaids. The preacher beamed as he said, I now pronounce you husband and wife, and Kyle lifted his veil to kiss me. Suddenly, an almost primal scream broke through the chapel. It was Bo, drunk, angry, and most importantly, with a gun in his hand. She is mine. You won't take her away from me. I'll kill you if I have to. Now let her go. Kyle reacted by pushing me behind him and spoke calmly. It's over, Bo. Now we are married. Please leave it alone. This won't help you. She's going to be a widow soon, idiot. Then nothing will stand in our way. Abby, if you want him to live, take Carrie and let's go. He was focused only on me, so he didn't hear or feel Autumn creeping up behind him. Most of them ran away from the church or were hiding in the pews. Among other things, Autumn was a police officer, a detective captain for the county. She disarmed him and called the police. We spent time comforting his parents, but they knew he would have to go back to prison for a long, long time. The list of charges with which he was accused turned out to be very long, and his lawyer suggested that he throw himself on the mercy of the court, citing that my marriage and the loss of my daughter were too difficult a test. Instead, he stood up and told the judge that he loved me and I loved him, that we wrote letters every day and I went to see him every week, and that we would be together again as soon as this misunderstanding was behind us. The judge looked at the district attorney, who showed him the visitor log for the period of time he was in prison, but I never showed up. Then he showed him 4 boxes of unopened letters, as well as a statement that no letter with my address was ever delivered to him. Juliet cried in Bob's arms when we heard the verdict. 4 years in a mental hospital, and if something happens, the 20-year sentence will come into effect. He lasted a year before attacking the doctor. His sentence has taken effect, and he will be 48 years old when he is released if he stays out of trouble. He died 12 years later. 8 years later, The entire family watched our daughters walk across the stage to receive their high school diploma. That's right, daughters. When Maria was 14, her mother remarried. Maria liked him very much, but when they decided to return to Honduras, she refused to go. Maria wanted her to maintain her American citizenship, so we agreed to take custody of her until she graduated. She even started using our name, and soon every boy in high school learned not to mess with our girls. They attended different colleges. Maria received a scholarship, and we paid for Carrie. We sent them money every month until they graduated. Maria became a nurse practitioner, and Carrie earned an MBA and got a job at a Fortune 500 company, quickly rising through the ranks. Both worked here, so we got to see them often. Maria flew to visit her mother 3 times a year and was persuaded to go work in their healthcare system. I had a feeling she was thinking about it. Our son was 13 and a star baseball player. His coach told us that even now he has college scouts watching him. Our 12-year-old daughter was too young to think about anything now other than an interest in boys. Usually one look at Henry's dad or grandpa would stop any unwanted attention. She was becoming amazing, combining the best aspects of Roz and Mom, with a little bit of me and Kyle thrown in too. Mom's romance was in full swing, and the thought of her hanging around the house alone bothered Kyle. So about a year after we got married, Kyle asked Henry and Bob to help him with a project, as well as a few professionals, and then invited Mom to his home. To yourself. Show her the 1,000-square-foot apartment they had remodeled for her. It sat above a 3-car garage left over from the original owners. There was a really nice bathroom and a bedroom with a combined kitchen and living room. Kyle told her that the thought of her being alone in this house bothered us, so we built it for her, hoping she would live with us but still have her privacy. After she stopped crying and kissing everyone involved, she moved out, only leaving 7 years later when she finally found the man she believed to be Mr. Right. Maria and Carrie immediately moved here during their senior year and while visiting from college. All the grandparents are still alive, although they are all over 70. We are afraid of the time when they begin to leave. I overheard Carrie and Maria talking to one of their friends who had been dumped by her boyfriend. "I thought he loved me," wailed her. They smiled and showed them the film of Kyle's proposal. The church was connected to video so the preacher could reach those who couldn't attend by streaming it online, and he made sure it was on, thinking we might want to keep it. We watched it in the bedroom on our anniversary, and I still cry every time. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.